Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name is Mary English. You can find me at www.maryenglish.com, maryenglish.co.uk and UK Astrologer. You can also find me on YouTube /at Mary English. You can also find me on Instagram, maryenglish.co.uk. So get in touch, contact me, email me, mary@maryenglish.co.uk. or mary@maryenglish.com. Don't mind either, they both work. So hello, how are you? I hope you are well. Now, as you know, I live in the UK, and you probably know that I live in the West Country in a place called Bath. I also don't live where all these eclipses are going to happen this year. I'm very sad about this because we're not going to see any of the eclipses that are going to happen. It's not fair. So if you're living somewhere where the eclipse is happening, it's all going to be eclipsey stuff for you. If you're in the USA this year, the majority of them are going to go past one of the biggest continents in the world, blah, blah, blah. But us teeny little place in the UK, I don't think we're getting one that's visible until later in this year. And also the other funny thing that always happens with eclipses is that it's cloudy. I can't see it. Thing. So I won't be commenting about the eclipses because I won't be visible. I won't be visible. They won't be visible to me. Now this week we are going to be covering a poet's chart. Now we have covered a particular poet before, and their name is K. Tempest, and they were born Kate Tempest, and that's in episode 190. But today we're going to talk about somebody that you might even have heard of, and their name is Rumi, Rumi. And if you're anywhere on social media, every now and again somebody will put up a little poem of his, and his poetry is particularly good. We also have to take into account that he wasn't born in the UK, he didn't speak English, so anything that you're reading that is his has been translated, and as they say, things can get lost in translation. So be wary of when you see poetry that is supposedly by him and it's rhyming. There's no way that he could have written a poem in his language and for it to still rhyme when it's been translated into English. So I have noticed a number of websites that is that, hello. Not only did he write that a long time ago, but it probably didn't rhyme when he wrote it, and it certainly can't rhyme now. So anyway, that's just that poets are divided into people that rhyme their stuff and don't rhyme their stuff. So within my family, my older sister is a professional performance poet, and my mother used to write poetry. They're both Aquarians. My mother was, she's in heaven now. And my mother used to criticise my sister by saying that her poetry didn't rhyme. None of her stuff that she's ever written rhymes, and so my mother used to say that it wasn't poetry, it was prose. But as my sister would quite rightly point out, to her, poetry doesn't have to rhyme for it to be a poem. But I'm not going to get too deep into poetry. I do enjoy poetry, I do like listening to it. Have I written any poems? No, I haven't. I've never written a poem. I've written lyrics to songs. But the whole creative world of poetry is as difficult to describe probably as astrology in one sentence. So ain't going to happen. Anyway, his name's Rumi. So let's go further into the history of and the chart of this famous poet. Now, Rumi is the poet we're going to be discussing, and if we start with Wikipedia, which is always a good place to start because then you can go off in different directions, and on the English version of Wikipedia they say that his name was Jalal al-Din Muhammad Rumi, and if you go to the Arab page of Wikipedia and then translate into English using Google Translate, his name now becomes Mohammed bin Hussein Ba al-Din al-Baqi al-Bakri. So we're going to talk about him as Rumi because shortening it makes it easier. But that might not be how he would be talked about in the country where he was born. What's nice about this is not only is he a famous poet, but we've actually got a date of birth. However, things being as they are when it comes to astrology, they're telling us that his date of birth is the 30th of September 12,007. So, not 12,000. Yes, 1,207. So it's 12,007. So we're now 2024. So that's a long time ago. But we have got an actual date of birth for him. And I'm going to have to add in, however, I went to Astro Databank and got his chart and went, oh, he's a Libra with moon in Libra. And then went Googling around the internet and looking at various different things. I went to SkyScript and there was a discussion page on there about Rumi. And they were using his chart from Astro Databank. And then I noticed on Astro Databank that his date of birth, they're using a Georgian calendar. And I thought, oh, well, hold on now. When was the Georgian calendar invented? Because on astro.com, if you go back far enough in time, you'll now have to use the calendar, and I think it's before 1500 and something, that is called the Julian calendar. And on astro.com, the ephemeris is calculated in Julian up until we get the Gregorian calendar. And then you're going to say to me, well, Mary, what are we talking about calendars for? Like, get on with the episode. No, I'm not going to, because you need to know that if someone was born, which he was in 1207, which is a long time ago, we need to use the Julian calendar, because with astrology, we're calculating things for a certain date. And if we're using the wrong calendar to make the date of the thing, and Astro Databank is using Gregorian, well, the Gregorian calendar didn't come into effect until 1582, and that was some pope or other that went, hey, let's change the calendar, I don't like the way it works. Because the Julian calendar is a system of dating that started round about 46 BC, so BC is before Christ, blah, 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 blah. And it was a calendar which added one extra day in every 4 years, giving us the leap year, because it was calculated that the Earth takes 365 and a quarter days to complete its circuit around the sun, not a straight 365 days. Okay, so astro.com has both sets of calendars. Astro Databank, for whatever reason, has decided that they're going to use the Gregorian calendar. And I thought, well, that's not fair for poor old Rumi, because if we're going to be, which is what we're going to do in a minute, if we're going to analyse his chart and what happened to him using the Gregorian calendar, we're going to have the wrong flapping date, because there's an extra day being added here and there. That means that the moon sign, because back in Arabic astrology, the moon was super important, we're going to have the wrong flapping chart, Mary. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. So I will include on the podcast show notes, which you can get to by using this address. Hold on, I've clicked out the flapping thing. So if you want to, because I'm not always sure where people are listening. I know a lot of you listen on Spotify. But you need to go to this website to see the show notes. So if you listen to a website and it's like, oh, what is it Mary's talking about? What's the picture that she's waffling? What's the chart she's using? Go to astromary.libsyn.com. So it's astromary.libsyn, libsyn.com. And then you'll be able to see the charts that I'm using, because I will include in there the one that's on Astro Databank, but I want to use the one using the Julian calendar, because it says on Wikipedia that his date of birth is the 30th of September 12,007. I'm going to use the flapping calendar that was in existence when this person was born. You can see I'm already getting worked up, can't you? Okay, so let's just, before I get too deeply into getting off track, let's look at the chart for the 30th of September 12,007. Now, I've used 6 a.m. And the other thing to consider is back then, the day didn't start, like if you're talking about, what day of the week are we and whatever's going on, until sunset. Okay, so I've done a chart for sunrise, which again will probably be completely wrong for the 30th of September. So I've done very early in the morning of the 30th of September. In fact, I think I'm just going to be, while I'm thinking about it now, I'm going to adjust that chart to midday. So lunchtime, 12 o'clock on the 30th of September 1207, using the Julian calendar, gives us somebody with a sun sign Libra and moon sign Capricorn. They have most definitely got sun and moon square. At 12 o'clock lunchtime gives us a Sagittarius ascendant, which would probably be quite fitting considering what he did later on, which I'll cover in a minute. So please ignore the houses and the ascendant. I have used equal house, but it makes no difference to the sign that the planets are in. And if we're assuming that the 30th of September 12,007 is the date that he was born, and we're using the local Julian calendar, which won't have been how an Arabic country would have done a chart anyway, because there'd be the moon things are really important. But anyway, moon's definitely in Capricorn, sun is definitely in Libra, and the way to get a Julian chart on astro.com is when you put a really early date and it will say to you, are you sure you want to use this? And you have to append and put so you put the date in the date box. So I put 1207 to put quotes around JUL. So you open quote JUL, close quote. So you can call quotes speech marks, or I use the word quotes, but it's the two little diddly things. You put two little diddly things before JUL and then two little diddly things afterwards. Otherwise you won't get on astro.com the correct, you won't get a Julian version of your chart, which will then, if you're lucky, turn up your Julian calendar date. So today's episode's a little bit how to do a chart from a long time ago, Mary. So now we've got a chart that has the planets in the right signs of the zodiac. The moon is 15 degrees Capricorn, and in and of a day it isn't going to shift the moon too much. So we're going to say that this is definitely sun sign Libra, because that is a for sure thing. If you're born on the 30th of September, if you're born, whatever, he's definitely going to have a sun in Libra. And we know for sure that he wasn't born the day before or the day after, so he's still going to have moon in Capricorn, and he's going to have all his other planets in the same signs. Now, if you're a poet and you're a Sufi poet and you're living out, and the country that he was born in is now called Afghanistan, and the village that he was born in is called Balkh, Balkh. I've also included in the show notes, so I do want you to whip over there and have a look. I've used on Google Maps the location of where he was born and where he ended up and died, and the various different other places that he lived in throughout his life. So he was let me just give you the age that he was when he popped it. Oopsie, hold on one second. He was 66 when he died. So what I want to talk about today is his natal chart. As far as I can work out, that is his natal chart. And there's a specific date where he came across another person that influenced him so much and changed the way that he wrote. We've got a date for that as well. So we've also got the date that he died. So we're going to look at astrologically those three dates: date of birth, date that he met this other chappie and his whole poetry thing he changed, and the date that he finally died. So going back to the beginning, we've got his chart, we've got Sun in Libra, Mercury in Libra, and Libra is the sign that really likes being in love and likes to sort of romanticize about things and, you know, talk about love. And Libra definitely is all about love. Now, Rumi, the poetry's altered so much over the years. There's a number of poems that are all about love, and he's apparently has written a lot about love and but let's just go through the planets. Okay, so we've got Sun Libra, Moon Capricorn, Mercury Libra, Venus in Scorpio. So if your Venus natally is in Scorpio, you are going to love and you're going to be hurt by love because it's all going to be so bad, and it's this like, I'm going to push my way through it and they're all bastards type of thing. And Mars is in Scorpio as well, so Venus and Mars in Scorpio. Mars is happy in the sign of Scorpio, and don't forget back then that they wouldn't even be looking at outer planets, which we're going to do, but they would, Venus and Mars would have been significant planets. So there you are, you're in an Arabic country. Venus in Scorpio is going to, probably back then they would have said sort of rather things about it, but Mars in Scorpio would be, inverted commas, a sort of a happy thing. Chart shape wise, using all of the planets now, which they wouldn't use back then, he's got a sort of a splashy splay type of chart. I think, yeah, all the planets all the way around the circle. We've got Jupiter in Cancer, so when natally your Jupiter's in Cancer, your luck is given to you via your family. Now, he's only got one retrograde planet, and that is Saturn. So he was a lucky bunny. He didn't have beg your pardon, he's got two planets that are retrograde. Saturn is retrograde and Neptune is retrograde. And interestingly, he's got his Neptune 1 degrees Aries retrograde, and it'll be quite interesting because at the moment Neptune's in the sign of Pisces, and it's not too far into the future it'll go into the sign of Aries. And I was wondering, you know, whether or not his poetry will be revitalized when Neptune goes back into Aries. We shall see, won't we? So where was I? Jupiter in Cancer, so you get your luck via your family. I think he had a couple of wives, and as is the case if you live of any age at all. Yeah, I thought I'd read that. When his wife died, Rumi married again and had a son. So in 1225 he married Gawar Katan in Karaman, and they had two sons, Sultan Walad and Aladdin Chalabi. And then when that wife died, he married again and had another son, Amir Alam Chalabi, and a daughter. So he would have ended up then with 4 kids. That's quite a good enough number. And he lived to be 66, so that's plenty of time to be able to get a couple of kids in and a couple of marriages into your life. And when your Jupiter is in Cancer, your luck is going to be via your family. So if you don't have any family and you've got your Jupiter in Cancer, go and adopt a few people because your luck is going to be very, very family based. You're going to have a tight family environment to make the best of Jupiter being in Cancer. Okay. Now, if Saturn's in Gemini, Saturn's not particularly happy in the sign of Gemini. In ancient astrology, and if you're following sort of Hellenistic astrology or medieval astrology, Saturn, did I see that? I did see that. Gemini. Did I see Saturn? Where did I just see it? That was Jupiter's detriment. Gemini. Where's Saturn? Yes, Saturn's a triplicity. We've got Saturn in Gemini. Oh no, we're okay. Saturn's reasonably all right in Gemini. I was looking at Cancer. Oh, I've got too many things open at the minute. Okay, so it's got Saturn in Gemini, but it's retrograde. Okay, so if your don't forget, you could be listening, you could definitely have your Saturn in Gemini, because he's born so long ago, all the planets will repeat themselves. Your sense of responsibility is going to be dual, D-U-A-L, because it's the twins. It's retrograde, so he's not going to be a marvellous person for considerations of responsibility. Natally, it forms a square, Mercury square Saturn, and the Saturn's retrograde, so you're not going to want to take a heap of responsibility when your Saturn's in Gemini, because you can be binging and bonging all over the place and doing lots of different stuff. Now, outer planets weren't discovered then. Doesn't matter, we can still analyse them. He's got Uranus in Leo, I've got that natally. He's got Neptune in Aries, which I say is just going to be coming up again, and he's got Pluto in Leo. So if you were born in the 1950s or thereabout, you might have Pluto in Leo. There's quite a lot of planets that have gone back into signs, isn't it, when we go to 1207. 1207. Pluto in Leo. There's bunches of people alive now that have got that. There's this whole idea with Pluto in Leo generations is that they want to have somebody sort of like Emperor of China type of thing. You know, they quite enjoy, worshipping is the wrong word, but they grow up in a generation where there is someone who's at the top of something and is the face of whatever and is strong within the community. His outer planets aren't close to each other. No, we haven't got any conjunctions going on there. A few decades earlier, Uranus and Pluto might have conjuncted in Leo, but he was born with his Uranus in Virgo. Uranus 29 degrees. Yeah, so a little bit earlier, Uranus and Pluto might have conjuncted, but his is 29 degrees Leo. It's just about to come out. So he was born after a generation where they might have had a conjunction with that. Now, Neptune being in Aries, as I say, let me just give you the year. So Neptune's going to go into Aries in the year, next year. Let me just find out when Neptune's going to be 1 degrees to Aries. So hold on a sec. We're not far off. So we're 2024 at the moment. Neptune's going to be 1 degree into Aries on the 28th of April next year. So it's just over a year's time from today. We're going to have an outer planet in the same sign as it was when this chappie was born. Ooh! So that's interesting. Uranus and Pluto won't do the thing because they're, at the moment, Uranus is in Taurus and Pluto's just started chugging through Aquarius, but you're going to have one outer planet that's going to be the same sign as his. And since Neptune is, if any blinking planet governs poetry, I would have thought Neptune does. So we'll just see what happens to his poetry. Now, don't forget, because he was born so long ago, various people have dug his stuff up, rewritten it, republished it, etc., etc., etc. Just like anybody born back in the day, Jesus included, Muhammad, whatever, anybody that's at the start of a religion. When Rumi was around, there was he was Arab, he was a Sufi. It's a different branch of the religions of a Muslim religion. And I read a very interesting article by a lady that writes for the New Yorker, and she said in all the years that his poetry has been rewritten, republished or whatever, everybody sort of has quite anglicised it and totally lost the original, which would have been Muslim. And that's been completely whitewashed out of his poetry. So when I quote in a little while one of his poems, I'm going to use it from the Arabic version of Wikipedia, directly translated into English, just using a computer program, rather than what somebody might have done in translating from another language. There's always going to be the input of the person, but if we're using AI, which language translation now is, it's just going to be the actual words, word from word from word. So we've got somebody who's got a splashy splay chart. They have got a grand trine in, it's taking in Neptune, but only because of the maths now. It's not an exact trine. Well, I mean, it is mathematically an exact trine. There is a grand trine in there, but Mars and Jupiter are in late degrees of water sign, and Neptune is in early degrees of a fire sign. So if Neptune had been in Pisces, which it isn't, that would be an exact, I mean, it is mathematically exact, but we could say, oh, he's got a grand trine of water. He doesn't. He's got a grand trine that's incorporating a water ruling planet, but it's actually in a fire sign. Oh, Mary's been so specific today. He does have, assuming that I've got this chart right, okay, all of this is assumptions, Neptune opposition to Mercury, because his Mercury is 2 degrees Libra and his Neptune is 1 degrees Aries, and his Neptune is retrograde. So his inspiration and what he writes about is going to probably come from Neptune, and Neptune in Aries expresses itself completely different to Neptune in Pisces, which is a ruler. Neptune in Aries is, I'm going to be the leader, the first, my inspiration that I have is going to be exclusively to my way of thinking, because Aries is all about me and I, whilst Pisces is all about us and the fog that we live in. So that's a little bit about his natal chart. As I say, I will put the picture of the Astro Databank chart up and include it on the podcast. I'm not going to talk about it because it's just going to drive me crazy, because I know that they've used the wrong calendar. I mean, I don't mean wrong as in it was wrong of them to do that. It's just that with me thinking about that we've got to use the calendar that existed then, how can we talk about the astrology of it? But yeah, there we go. Now, so let's go back to Wikipedia to learn a little bit more about him. So he's commonly known as Rumi in English, but his full name was Sipalasar as Muhammad bin Al-Hussein Al-Katibi Al-Baqi Al-Bakri, more commonly known as Maulana Jalal ad-Din Muhammad Rumi. And back then you could be, which happened in English as well, you could be named after the place that you were born or where you came from or the family that you're part of. Don't forget, surnames and names themselves over the years have completely altered. I mean, I was married to somebody who is Jewish, and his ancestors only 2 generations back came over from Poland and Russia, and when they arrived in the UK they couldn't speak English, obviously because they come from another country and a bit of a rush, and they would name them when they arrived, so they would give them a surname, so you'd be given the surname that might have something to do with your job. I mean, I've got a friend and her surname is Smith, and that's because way back in the day somebody would have been a blacksmith, so that's how you got the surname. So naming is completely different today to how it might have been back then. Now we just carry on a family name, or not, as the case might be, but then quite a lot of times you were named, and Chris Mitchell talks about that, that you would be named after where you were born or where you lived. I live in Bath, and if I'd been around millions of years ago, I might have been Mary from Bath, and then that'd be called Bath Mary or something, you know. So your location or your job, you know, I talk about Astro Mary, could be that type of thing, okay? So the country that he was born in is now Afghanistan. Back then it was called Persia, and Wikipedia says he was born to Persian parents in Balk, modern-day Afghanistan, or Wakash, a village on the East Bank, etc. And then we then go on to childhood and emigration. Rumi's father was a theologian and a mystic, and he was known by his followers as this, that, and the other. And they started moving because the Mongols invaded Central Asia sometime between 1215 and 1220, and his whole family and a group of disciples set out westward. So I've included in the show notes to this episode the actual cities that and the distance that he travelled. And when I was looking at it on Google Maps, I just thought, bloody hell, that's quite a few 100 miles. And apparently if you walked it all in one day, which obviously you wouldn't, that's 937 hours it'd take you to go from where he was born to where he ended up dying. And he's gone west from Afghanistan all the way through Iran, and then he's gone through a little bit of Kuwait, I think that is, a tiddly bit of Syria, assuming he's, I don't know, walking on the main roads, which obviously didn't exist then. He went to a place called Karaman, and then he ended up in Konya in what is now Turkey. So he would have spent an awful amount of time travelling for whatever reason, wars, maybe other relatives who are in better places, come and meet me here, Rumi, come and live in my place, blah, blah. Built up his following as he went. And that what makes me think he's more likely then to have had a Sagittarius ascendant. When I did the chart of Samuel Hahnemann, the guy that invented homeopathy, he was an Aries, and he had a Sagittarius ascendant, and I think he had Sun in Leo or something in the Sun of the 5th house. And I just thought, well, that was really fitting because he moved all over the bloody place because he'd moved to a particular city and he'd fall out with everybody locally and have to move somewhere else because they were busy giving him a hard time, so he'd shift off somewhere else. And sometimes people with Sagittarius ascendant will just move anyway. So I think it's more likely that he was born during the day rather than at night. And I'm quite enjoying this chart that I've made with 12 p.m. Nobody's ever born exactly as the sun rises, as the sun is highest in its point. But hey, there we go. I think he might have had a Sagittarius ascendant. Can't see why I'd want to travel that much because it's a considerable distance to have travelled back then. I mean, you would be travelling by donkey or horse. You wouldn't have an aeroplane, and maybe you walk in a considerable distance as well. Now, so the next heading in Wikipedia is Education Encounters with Shams-i-Tabriz. So he met this chap, Shams-i-Tabriz, on the 15th of November 1244, and that completely changed his life. Okay, now there's umpteen different accounts of what happened and who said what. I'm not going to read them out because I've read about 40 different versions of it, and even the Wikipedia one doesn't cover those, and I've looked at the translations of Wikipedia. But that seems to be a pretty important date that somebody's noted down somewhere. So let's have a look at the transits for the date where he met this dervish. And this chappie then influenced his life so much that his poetry and his writings started to alter. Now, if you want to do this on astro.com, in the transit box, the box where you put dates in, I put the date because they're saying that they met up on the 15th of November 1244. And back then you'd have to use the Julian calendar. What you do is when you put the date for the year in the box, like I told you before, when you're creating the chart, you have to use inverted commas, like speech marks, okay? And then you put speech marks open and then JUL and then speech mark close. And then it will give you a chart with the transits for that date using the Julian calendar. Now, I could have done it, which I lost the will to live while I was trying to do it. You can go to the ephemeris and you can look at the ephemerises, but I can do that, but I prefer not to. And I thought, actually, if we're doing this all correctly, and I've got his chart right, we got some significant things. I mean, this was a big thing from meeting this chap. because it completely inspired him to do different stuff. I mean, he was following lots of poets anyway and reading all of their things that they'd done. And obviously he was educated enough to be able to read. I mean, back then some people couldn't read and didn't read. Women weren't taught to read. You were too busy in the kitchen cooking the dinners and having the kiddies. But if this is somebody that really changes in life in some way, there's got to be something going on astrologically. So Saturn, transiting Saturn, is now exactly conjunct to his natal Mercury. So we've got Mercury 2 degrees Libra, Saturn is 3 degrees Libra on that date, and Venus, which is the ruling planet to Libra and also the one about love and stuff, because then he starts writing a hell of a lot more stuff about love when he meets this bloke. And when he talks about being in love with him, he's not going to be in love with him, hold his hand and marry him, but he just was so overwhelmed by this bloke's, big in his field, and now I've discovered him and he's challenging what I'm writing. Venus is now in Capricorn, conjunct his moon. I thought, oh wow, that's pretty significant. When you meet someone and there could be something different happening, Venus, because it won't last, Venus conjuncting your moon, that's going to be a pretty significant time in your life. Mars is also transiting through the sign of Libra. It's not a Rumi planet or anything in his chart, but Venus is, because we definitely know that he's a Libra, for sure. So having the Venus conjunction to the moon, and even if it's not conjunct to the moon, because he wasn't born with moon in Capricorn, it'll be squaring to his sun sign, which is Libra. So I thought, oh yeah, okay, that seems pretty cushy. I like that. And the sun is now in Saggy. And I think meeting him prompted him to move a bit more. Let me just double check. Yeah, so while he's meeting up with this Shams-i-Tabriz, he also travelled to Damascus and spent 4 years there. So the Shams chap had travelled through the Middle East searching and praying for someone who would endure, inverted commas, endure my company. The voice said to him, what will you give in return? And Shams says, my head. And the voice then said, the one you seek is Jalal ad-Din of Konya, which is Rumi. And on the night of the 5th December 1248, as Rumi and Shams were talking, Shams was called to the back door, and then somebody chopped his head off or something, some friend or relative of Rumi's. Anyway, but Rumi's love for and his bereavement at the death of Shams found their expression in an outpouring of lyric poems, one called Divan-e-Shams-el-Tabrizi. He himself went out searching for Shams and journeyed again to Damascus. Then he realised, why should I seek? I am the same as he. His essence speaks through me. I have been looking for myself. So first of all, he meets up with this chap that has a big impact on him, and then some idiot decides to kill him. So that's 4 years later. So they meet up with 44, and the death happens 5th of December 1248. I'm not going to look at that chart because it's too depressing. But that would be, if you met somebody and they were a big impression on you and you really respectful of who they were, and then somebody else goes and pops them off, that's going to have a big impact. And especially if you're a poet, you're going to be writing loads of poems about that too. So that's the transits for the date that they met. A little further on, we've got a guy called Hassam. I can't find the date of birth for him, but he did a bit of dictation, and there's 6 volumes of his masterwork, the Mathnavi. He dictated it, and this Hassam chappy helped him write it. And interestingly, I found, it's amazing what you Google when you're researching something, I found a company in London that was selling a copy of this a 6-volume work of poetry that Rumi's now written with the help of this chap, and it's for sale in a rare book shop website based in, I think they're in London, New Bond Street, and it's a beautifully illustrated copy, And I looked at the price, £32,500. And it says here, this is Rumi's most celebrated work and a pillar stone of Sufi literature, formed of a vast collection of self-reflective lyrical anecdotes of Sufi wisdom inspired by the Quran and Islamic teachings. This vast collection of Mathnavis, a form of Persian meter, was compiled by Rumi, known as Malwana Master, in circa 1244 during the poet's time in Anatolia. What sets this particular collection of poetry aside from its contemporaries is that Rumi compiled these verses in a spontaneous manner as a reflection of events or thoughts that appeared to him over the course of his everyday life. So he was writing poetry almost every day, so it's an enormous work. And so the revelatory nature of the composition and loosely connected narrative of didactic stories makes this work immensely popular with Eastern and Western audiences alike, and has remained one of the most collected poetical works internationally since Rumi's death in 1273 AD. This particular copy was dated circa 1500. So, but anyway, it's whoever it was that made it. Timurid, Persia or Turkey, mid-15th century. Yeah, so whoever wrote this, it's got some lovely illustrations in it. And I was sort of thinking to myself, oh, there's no way I'd ever be able to buy that. I couldn't. But anyway, the picture of it is also on the show notes. It's absolutely lovely. Because over the years, this particular poet has had so many followers and so many people writing about him and rewriting this stuff, it's quite tricky if you're back in the day person and then your legacy lives on. There's going to be so many reinterpretations of what you've done. But I thought it was lovely that somebody had created the work that he did. These would have had to have been handwritten. The printing press hadn't been invented. And he caused an enormous inspiration in the poetical world. But yeah, okay, so next date. So he's walked or travelled or whatever method he used west from where he was born and grew up. He's now today it's called Turkey, now he's in Turkey. He's in a place called Konya, and in December 1273, Rumi fell ill. He predicted his own death and composed the well-known ghazal, which begins with the verse, "How dost thou know what sort of king I have within me as companion? Do not cast thy glance upon my golden face, for I have iron legs." And he died on the 17th of December 1273. His death was mourned by the diverse community of Konya, with local Christians and Jews joining the crowd that converged to bid farewell as his body was carried through the city. Rumi's body was interred beside that of his father, and a splendid shrine, the Green Tomb, was erected over the place of his burial, and his epitaph reads, "When we are dead, seek not our tomb in the earth, but find it in the hearts of men." Quite like that. Some nice little quotey poops. So let's have a look at the date that he dies. Again, I'm using the Julian calendar. Again, when I put the date in on astro.com, I put 1273, open speech quotes, write JUL in small case, and close the speech quotes. And we've got Mercury retrograding, which isn't fun if you're not born with Mercury retrograde. And once again, we've got transiting Saturn is now conjunct natal Mercury. So when he meets his best mate, Saturn was transiting his Mercury, and he's 1244, so what age does that make him? Hold on, let me just do some math. Yeah, he's 37 when he meets his master, and he's 66 when he dies. I think that's right. Yeah, he's 66 when he dies. And it's interesting that he sort of dies, and he knew he was going to die. Well, whatever was it that he fell ill with? So if you're back in the day and you're 66 years old and you feel absolutely horrendous and you take to your bed and stuff, and then you die a few days later, whatever, because that's obviously not a heart attack or a stroke, because they happen suddenly. You think, well, there must have been a bit of a build-up. But anyway, so this is the date of his death. We've got Mercury retrograde, we've got Saturn exactly conjunct to his natal Mercury, and he felt horrible the first time that happens, because this lovely person that he's just met and he's really chuffed about, some other idiot decides to chop that person's head off or kill them or whatever it was he did. Venus is returning, so Venus is now in Scorpio natal. He's got Venus at 11 degrees, and when he dies Venus is 16 degrees. Uranus is now in Gemini, so that's an air sign, and Uranus is 5 degrees, so that's making an aspect to his natal Mercury. Transiting Neptune, I think, has just gone into Virgo. So that's not particularly doing much transit-wise. The moon's in Pisces, so on the day that he dies, the moon's in Pisces. That's not doing... That probably could square to his natal Saturn, which is retrograde. But I think and the Sun is in Capricorn and Pluto's in Capricorn. Now, if you're alive now, you've lived through a Pluto in Capricorn transit, because that started in 2008, and now Pluto is just into Aquarius. So we've got some planets that we ourselves are going to have experience of. Uranus and Neptune, yeah. So Neptune's just gone into Virgo, which sort of think, what planet could have, inverted commas, killed him? I don't think Saturn's particularly helpful. And if Mercury is how you communicate and Saturn goes and boom, you're not going to want to communicate at that point. Not to say it's going to kill you, because we've got modern medicine now and we can keep people alive much longer. Transiting Jupiter is 0 degrees into Aquarius, and transiting Saturn is 0 degrees into Libra. We've got some couple of 0 degrees there, and Neptune is 0 degrees into Virgo. We've got 3 planets that are 0 degrees. It's quite a significant date, even if you're not going to die at that point. Something's going on, isn't it? Venus is conjuncting natal Venus. So, yeah, took to his bed and passed over and was celebrated. His life was celebrated, or his death, I don't know. But we have got Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, which is going to form... What aspect is that going to form? Oh, it's going to form an opposition to his natal Saturn. So we've got quite a lot of Saturn things going on. So we've got transiting Saturn retrograding opposition natal retrograding Saturn in Gemini. Is that right? So transiting Mercury is 21 degrees and natal Saturn is 24 degrees into Gemini. Yeah, that is pretty significant, isn't it? And then transiting Saturn is exactly conjunct to Mercury. So on his death, there's a lot of Saturn-Mercury stuff going on for sure. And then you've got the added thing of the Venus exactly conjunct. So I don't know if it was a painful death. Nobody's written that, I don't know. But that's quite a significant amount of transits for someone. And 66 isn't that old to today's standards, but he's left an enormous body of work, and I would have thought his most important planet, if you're going to be a writer, is going to be your Mercury, and he writes this massive work because this Hassan guy is helping him at it. So today we've been talking about Rumi, the poet, He was a Muslim and he believed in the teachings of Islam. He was able to attract people from other religions and sects for him and his followers, and all religions were good and true in their concepts. So they treated Muslims, Christians and Jews equally. You just sort of wish that could happen today. At the request of his disciples, Rumi put his ideas and principles in a book that he called the Mathnavi, which he used threads from daily stories. Yeah, so I'm going to read you a little bit of a bit of his poetry that, as I say, that is translated now using the Arab page of Wikipedia and Google Translate. Okay, so, and this is a poem that was translated. It's called The Flute's Moan. So listen to the flute tell its story, and from the pain of separation he broadcasts his complaint. Since I was cut off from the forest, men and women have been crying because of my groans. I want a chest torn apart by the wound of separation, to tell him the pain of longing. Everyone is cut off from his origin. He always longs for the time he arrived. Thus I become a singer in forums. I sing for the happy and I cry for the miserable. Everyone thinks that I am his companion, but none of them, the happy ones and the miserable ones, realised the truth about what I was in. My secret wasn't far from my side, however. Where is the conscious ear and the seeing eye? The body is intertwined with the spirit, and the spirit permeates the body. But how can a person see that spirit? The groan of the flute is fire, not air. There is no one whose heart fire is not disturbed. The fire of the flute is the surah of wine and fever of love. Thus the flute was a friend of Pan. Thus his melodies tore the veils from our eyes. Who saw something like a flute as a poison and an antidote? Whoever sees a longing lover like a flute? He tells us stories of the road that was soaked in blood. He tells us the stories of crazy love. The wisdom he narrates is forbidden to those who do not understand. No one can buy sweet talk except the informed ear. Now, I have absolutely no idea if that is what Rumi originally wrote, because that's been translated and Google has translated it again. But I have to say that his poetry, in whichever way you read it or find it, whether or not it's the origins of it, he certainly was a prolific writer and, as far as I'm concerned, a jolly good poet. But whether or not you're ever going to get to the origins of what he wrote about is a different thing altogether. So today we've been looking at the chart of the poet Rumi. You'll see on social media pinging up here and then stuff that's supposed to be attributed to him, but keep in mind that would have been translated, and probably is mostly quoted from things that were translated much later than when he was about. And we talked about his birth, the date that he meets the chappie that influenced him a lot, his date of death, and I've translated his chart into the Julian calendar. So I've had quite a lot of fun today doing the translations of the chart. So if you would like to get in contact, you can contact me, mary@maryenglish.co.uk. You can find me at maryenglish.com or .co.uk, UK Astrologer. You can find me on YouTube, so YouTube /@Mary English. That's my name and my YouTube channel. You can't steal it. You can find me on Instagram as maryenglish.co.uk. So that's the name that I've chosen on there to differentiate me between the singer whose name is Mary English, and I've lost my Twitter account to her probably. But anyway, I hope you have a fab week, and if you've got a question about astrology or you want me to talk about your chart, then ping me an email. If there's somebody you think I should be interviewing, again, ping me an email, and I hope you have a fab week. Bye bye now.